Hello, and thanks for downloading this free resource. This is a pacing guide, and it's meant to help you identify which standards to teach and calculate how much time you should spend on each unit based on the number of standards. So let me just give you kind of an overview of how it works. This is called a worksheet. The pacing guide that you'll be filling out is called the template here. My example is the next tab. And then critical areas, these are areas that Common Core standards have identified it as the most important for grade 6. And so they're summarized at the top here, and then there's more details about them. We're gonna come back to that idea. These are each of the domains, or you'll hear me call these units, are organized along the bottom here. And a note, I separated fraction and decimal operations, which is number systems, and rational numbers, because I usually like to teach rational numbers later in the year. So I kept those as separate. And so let's take a look at the actual document. I've color coded it to hopefully make it easier to use. Anything in green requires you to enter something. The directions are in blue, and any cells that are white actually have a cell address, or excuse me, have a formula written in them, and they're going to do work for you. You just leave those alone. On the side, though, it does tell you how the formula was derived if you're curious. Same thing down here. Green means we got to do something. White means leave it alone. And red means these are our critical areas. So, two parts of the document. The first part is all about getting the actual number of teaching days. On paper, it looks like we teach 180 days, but that's not actually true. So this first part will help you figure out how many disruptions we have and how many actual teaching days. This extra space here is purposely put there so that when you print, it'll print nicely on 2 pages. And current page or current sheet makes it print really nicely, and you would just go next to print it. And then down here, this whole part is all about getting the estimated number of weeks we should spend on each unit. So if we look at mine, it's got those calculations in there, and that's what we'll use to help plan our year. So let's get started. I'm going to be going back and forth between my example and your pacing guide. Our first step is to calculate the total number of calendar days. And I have a calendar here to help model that. I would basically advise printing this out and then tallying each month separately. This says that red is holidays, so I would take 2 days out for March and get my total, and follow that procedure to get the total number of days. So pause the video for a moment, get your calendar out, and count how many total teaching days do you have. All right, so we're going to leave this part be for a moment and come down to school disruptions. Let's take a look at my example. So when we're talking about school disruptions, I mean things that happen during the year that don't appear on the calendar. So beginning of the year, I have 3 days where I teach procedures and give assessments, and so I'm not teaching new standards. So I want to subtract that. Those will be disruptions. So I'm going to put them in here, number of days, the reason for the disruption. And here are just some ideas about things that you might consider. Beginning of the year, parent-teacher conferences, trips, days before breaks that you can't teach, reteaching procedures, and then sporting events, standardized tests. So take a moment and complete the green portion of the school disruptions. Go ahead and pause. Okay, so again, this should have calculated for you. For me, I'm missing 27 days due to disruptions. That number should automatically appear up here for total disruptions. And then it should be used to calculate my actual teaching days. So on paper, they say we have 180 days to teach. We actually have less than that. For me, I have 146 days. So that's important because that number is used down below here to estimate the number of weeks we should spend. So let's start on the left side of this table here. And Just to let you know, there are directions, written directions across the top if you prefer that method of learning. So first thing, I have these in the order that I taught them. Yours is in a little bit different order, but I want you to know how to change those should you wish to. So if I wanted to move my geometry unit, I would go click on the row column, and then I want to use my keyboard commands for copy and paste. So I'm on a Mac, that's Command C, and PC would be Control C. And then I would come down to where I want to put it. I'm going to put it right after this 47. So I'm going to click that row heading again, right click, and I'm going to insert a row below. Then if I click inside that box and just do my Command V or Control V, then it pastes everything. Now notice it pasted at the bottom where these are centered. I can change that up top here. I can go to what's called vertical alignment and just hit the middle. And if I come down, now it looks like the rest. And if to finish this process, I would go up, click on geometry, the 43 row header, and I would right click and I would delete that row. And you can just follow that procedure to move things around. And I'm going to undo. That works here, Control Z or undo, Control or the undo button, and leave it where it's at. So that's your first step. This may be something you want to do after you've gone through and looked at each of the standards. So you can pause now and do it, or you can come back and do that step later. The next thing you and I are going to do right now is look at the standards. So this right here, if we look in your pacing guide, this is the actual number of standards for each of the units that Common Core has identified. And so for grade 6, there are 45. Notice on my pacing guide that there are 37. That's because I realize with the time that I have, I can't teach all of the units. So for each unit, I'm going to try to cut, as a rule of thumb, 1 to 3 standards so that I don't complete the year and have a whole unit or 2 I haven't taught. So first thing you're going to do, let's look at geometry. So first thing we'll do is we'll go look at geometry. And sorry, I already had that in there. So I'm going to go through each of the standards. I'm pretty darn familiar with the standards, but this is area, I want to teach it. Volume, want to teach it. This is about coordinate polygons on the coordinate plane. Again, I got to cut 1 to 3. I'm going to cut this because later in the rational unit, they're going to get a chance with coordinate planes. So I'm going to skip that one. And I'm going to put a 1 here for surface area. And it tallies for me. So I'm saying I'm going to teach 3 standards. When I go to my pacing guide, I already have 3 standards because I changed it. But if I wanted, let's say it was like yours that started with 4, and I decided I was only going to teach 3, I would simply just click into the cell and write 3. Notice, though, when it's 4, that this factor changes and the number of weeks changes. So that's why this step's really important, because it adjusts our estimated week, or estimated weeks that we should teach the unit. So you'll do that for each of the units. Now, I want to address number systems with you because I think this is a critical unit. And so if I go to number systems, again, there's 4 standards. And basically we've got multiply and divide fractions, long division, decimal operations, and then greatest common factor, least common multiple. I want to teach all of those, but I kind of disagree with Common Core in that I think that adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals are all kind of separate skills that kids need to learn conceptually. I think you can group add, subtract together, but multiply and divide need to be kind of thought of as their own standards, which is why on my pacing guide, instead of having 4 here, I changed that to a 6. So at 4, it's 3.5 weeks. At 6, it's almost 5. So pause for a moment, and this process should take you some time to really get into each of those standards, especially depending on how familiar you are with them. But go ahead and go through and change this to meet how many standards you plan to teach in each of your units. Okay, Now, this is the beauty of the spreadsheet. So if we come over here to estimated weeks and we look how many it's telling us, it's saying you should spend about 5 weeks on this. Okay, now over here, I actually recorded how much time I spent. I spent 10 actual weeks. I planned to spend more than the spreadsheet told me to do because this is a unit where I in the past I haven't spent enough time, and then every single unit my kids struggle. And I realize if I spend a lot more time up top, then kids do better in rational numbers, expressions everywhere. So I said, yes, I am going to spend 10 weeks here. But remember, the number of total weeks that we have is based off of how many days you have to teach. I only have 29 weeks. So that means when I spend 10 weeks here, now I need to make some adjustments as I teach my units. So when I get ready to teach geometry, I'm going to open that up and look at what it suggests, and then I'm going to think about my my pacing for the rest of the units. So let's just see how what I taught compared to the spreadsheet. So here I rounded down to 2. This one quite a round down to 3. This one I actually gave a little bit more time than suggested because this was another area where I felt like if I put the time in, kids really benefited. Here, I took my rational numbers unit and I cut it in half. And I was able to do that by teaching number lines in proportions and ratios. And then because of all that time that I spent in the decimal and fraction operations. And then I gave a little bit more time to expressions and equations. So this estimated weeks is really a guidance for you. It's like a starting point, but know that time is finite. You only have, let's say for me, 29 weeks. So if I spend a lot of time in the beginning of the year on a unit, then I need to make some adjustments. And you could even put these what your personal plan is in here and make adjustments as you go. I like to keep track of the dates that I taught them because that helps me in planning for the following year. And then I also write the date that I updated the spreadsheet because sometimes I forget to go back and then I don't know if it was last year's or the years before. And then the final piece here is teaching notes. I like to write and capture teaching notes that help me figure out how to make changes for the following years. And that's it. So I hope you find this document useful. This is my first resource on Teachers Paid Teachers, so I would love it if you had time to review. If you have any feedback for me, please leave it in the comments or shoot me an email if you catch an error. And I wish you the very best start to your year. Thank you.